Linny stood at the observation window of the transport ship, her large purple eyes fixed on the approaching human space station. At just 4 feet tall, she felt her heart racing as she watched the massive structure grow larger. The human-built station was enormous, just like its builders, and that thought made her antenna twitch nervously. Approaching Earth Station 1. Prepare for docking procedures, the ship's AI announced, its voice echoing through the empty passenger compartment. She smoothed down her diplomatic uniform for the 100th time, the silver fabric shimmering under the artificial lights. Being chosen as the first junior diplomat from her planet should have been an honor, but right now it felt more like a punishment. Nobody had told her humans would be so big. The docking procedure went smoothly, but Linny's legs felt wobbly as she approached the airlock. She clutched her digital pad tightly, running through her mental checklist of proper diplomatic protocols. Her species, the Tenari, were known for their technological achievements, not their physical presence. She had to make a good impression. The airlock hissed open. Linny froze. There, waiting to greet her, stood 3 humans. They towered over her like living buildings, each one at least twice her height. The one in the middle, wearing what appeared to be a formal uniform, stepped forward with an outstretched hand. "Welcome to Earth Station 1, Ambassador Linny. I'm Station Commander Reed," the human said, his voice deep but gentle. Linny stared at the massive hand extended toward her, remembering her training about human handshakes. With trembling fingers, she reached out. Her entire hand disappeared into the commander's palm, and she had to suppress a squeak of alarm. "Thank you, Commander," she managed to say, her universal translator working perfectly despite her stutter. "I'm honored to be here as a representative of the Tenari Cultural Exchange Program." The 2 other humans introduced themselves as Lieutenant Baker and Dr. Mills. They all smiled at her, which according to her cultural briefing was meant to be friendly, but their massive teeth made her antenna curl in instinctive fear. As they began walking through the station's corridors, Linny had to take 3 steps for every one of theirs. The humans noticed and thoughtfully slowed their pace, which somehow made her even more self-conscious. "We've prepared quarters for you in the diplomatic section," Commander Reed explained. "We've adjusted the furniture to accommodate your size requirements." "That's very kind," Linny replied, trying to keep her voice steady as groups of humans passed by, each one glancing at her with obvious curiosity. Some even waved, causing her to press closer to the wall. They reached the diplomatic quarter, and Linny nearly sighed in relief when she saw the door to her quarters was sized for someone of her stature. At least she wouldn't need a stepladder just to enter her room. "Dinner will be served in the main hall at 1900 hours, Commander Reed informed her. "We've made sure to include dishes suitable for your dietary requirements. The whole station is excited to have you here," Lieutenant Baker added with another tooth-filled smile. "It's not every day we get to host such a distinguished visitor." Linny felt her face flush purple with embarrassment. "I'm hardly distinguished," she protested. "I'm just a junior diplomatic attaché." "Nonsense," Dr. Mills said warmly. "You're making history as the first Tenari to live among humans. That's pretty distinguished in my book." After the humans left, Linny collapsed onto her perfectly sized bed, her heart still racing. How was she supposed to survive 6 months on this station? Everything was too big, too loud, and the humans were all so friendly. It was terrifying. She pulled out her personal communicator and sent a message to her supervisor back home. "Arrived safely. Humans bigger than expected. Please advise." The response came quickly. "Remember your training. You represent all Tenari. Make us proud." Linny groaned and buried her face in her pillow. Somehow, she didn't think her training had properly prepared her for the reality of being surrounded by giant, smiling humans who seemed determined to be nice to her. This was going to be a very long assignment. Linny's first week on Earth Station 1 proved more challenging than she'd imagined, but not for the reasons she expected. The humans weren't scary because they were mean. They were scary because they were incredibly, overwhelmingly nice. It started during her first breakfast in the station's cafeteria. She sat alone at a small table specially installed for her, pushing around something the menu called scrambled eggs with her tiny fork. That's when Officer Tom from station security approached her table, carrying his own tray. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, already pulling up a human-sized chair. Nobody should eat breakfast alone. Leanie's antenna went rigid with shock. In Teneri culture, sharing a morning meal was an intimate activity reserved for family or potential mates. Before she could stammer out a response, Tom was already sitting down. "Try adding some of this," he suggested, offering her a small red bottle. "It's called ketchup. Makes everything taste better." Offering food seasonings was another Teneri courtship ritual. Linny felt her purple face turning almost black with embarrassment. "Tea, thank you," she managed, taking the bottle with trembling hands. She couldn't refuse without causing a diplomatic incident, could she? The situation only grew more complicated as the days passed. Lieutenant Baker from engineering kept accidentally running into her in the corridors, always with technical questions that could easily have been sent through the station's communication system. Dr. Mills insisted on personally conducting her medical checkup, instead of letting a medical drone handle it. But it was the incident in the hydroponics bay that really sent her into a panic. Linny had gone there seeking some quiet time among the plants, which reminded her of home. She found Commander Reed tending to some flowering plants. "Ah, Ambassador Linny," he called out cheerfully. "Come see these earth flowers. They're called roses." Hesitantly, she approached. The flowers were beautiful, their red petals vibrant against the artificial lighting. "Would you like one?" Reed asked, carefully cutting a small rose and offering it to her. Linny nearly fainted on the spot. Offering flowers was the most traditional courtship gesture in Teneri culture. Was the station commander himself trying to court her? This couldn't be happening. I need to check some diplomatic communications," she squeaked, turning and running from the hydroponics bay, so fast her feet barely touched the ground. Back in her quarters, Linny paced frantically, her antenna curling and uncurling in distress. She needed to report this situation. She activated her communicator and sent an urgent message to her supervisor. "Emergency. Multiple humans showing courtship behaviors. The station commander offered flowers. Security officer shares meals. What do I do?" The response took several agonizing minutes. "Are you certain these are courtship behaviors? Human cultural database indicates they may have different social customs. But they keep being nice to me." Linny typed back frantically. "They offer food, ask personal questions, and seek out my company. Recommend consulting human cultural database before jumping to conclusions," came the maddeningly calm reply. Linny pulled up the cultural database on her pad, but every time she started reading, another incident would pop into her mind. Just that afternoon, Dr. Mills had asked about her favorite colors and hobbies. Classic Teneri courtship questions. A knock at her door made her jump. "Ambassador Linny." It was Tom's voice. "We're having a movie night in the recreation room. Would you like to join us?" Group entertainment. Yet another courtship ritual. Linny looked around her room desperately, as if seeking an escape route. I'm reviewing important diplomatic documents." She called back, her voice higher than usual. "No problem. Maybe next time." Linny slumped onto her bed, antenna drooping. How could she ended up in a situation where multiple humans, including her superior officers, seemed to be competing for her attention? And more importantly, how was she going to survive the remaining 5 months and 3 weeks of her assignment without causing an interstellar diplomatic incident? She needed a plan, and she needed one fast. Linny's third week on Earth Station, one reached a new level of chaos during the station's monthly cultural exchange meeting. She sat in her specially sized chair, trying to make herself as small as possible while Commander Reed gave his presentation about Earth customs. "And that's why humans often share food as a sign of friendship," Reed explained to the gathered alien diplomats. Linny's antenna shot straight up. Friendship. She'd been interpreting all those shared meals with Tom completely wrong. Before she could process this revelation, Reed continued, "Humans also value personal conversations and getting to know their colleagues. It helps build trust and camaraderie." Her purple face darkened as the implications sank in. All those personal questions hadn't been courtship attempts at all. She slid lower in her chair, wishing she could disappear entirely. But the real crisis struck during lunch break. Linny was hiding in a quiet corner of the cafeteria when she overheard two human crew members talking. "Tom's been so protective of the little ambassador. It's adorable," one said. "Well, he treats her like his little sister. You know how he is, always looking out for everyone," the other replied. Linny's food turned to ash in her mouth. Little sister, she'd been interpreting his attention all wrong. She'd even sent 3 separate panic messages to her homeworld about his courtship behaviors. Her communicator chimed with a message from her supervisor. "Update on human courtship situation." Linny stared at the message in horror. She'd caused such a fuss, and now she'd have to admit she'd misunderstood everything. Her antenna curled in mortification. "Situation unclear," she typed back weakly, "investigating cultural differences." Just then, Dr. Mills spotted her and walked over. "Ambassador Linny, I've been looking for you. We're organizing a station-wide party next week to celebrate Earth's first contact day. Would you like to help with the planning?" In her panicked state, Linny's translator glitched on the word party, and she heard the Teneri word for mate selection gathering. She jumped up so quickly she knocked over her drink. "I just remembered I have to calibrate my antenna," she blurted out, darting away and leaving a very confused Dr. Mills behind. She ran all the way back to her quarters, her heart pounding. This was getting out of control. She needed to calm down and think rationally. Pulling out her cultural database, she finally forced herself to read the section on human social interactions properly. Humans often express friendship through sharing meals, casual conversation, offering assistance, including others in group activities, showing concern for well-being. Everything she'd been interpreting as courtship was just friendship. Linny groaned and flopped face first onto her bed. She'd been making a fool of herself for weeks. A knock on her door made her jump again. "Ambassador." It was Tom. "You left your communicator in the cafeteria. I thought you might need it." Linny opened the door a crack, her antenna twitching nervously. Tom knelt down to her eye level, which she now realized was meant to be friendly, not romantic, and handed her the device. "Are you okay?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "You seem more jumpy than usual lately." "I'm fine," she squeaked, just adjusting to human customs. "Well, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here," he offered with a kind smile. "That's what friends are for, right?" Friends. Just friends. Linny felt simultaneously relieved and, surprisingly, a little disappointed. "Thank you," she managed to say before quickly closing the door. She leaned against it, sliding down to sit on the floor. How was she going to face everyone now? She'd been acting so strangely, avoiding people, running away from perfectly normal social interactions. They must think she was the worst diplomat ever. Her communicator chimed again. Another message from her supervisor. "Received interesting report from Earth Station 1. Humans concerned about your behavior. Recommend immediate cultural recalibration." Linny buried her face in her hands. She definitely needed to recalibrate. Her entire understanding of human behavior needed a complete overhaul. But first, she had to figure out why the word friends made her feel so strangely disappointed when Tom said it. The truth hit Linny like a malfunctioning gravity generator during the station's weekly cultural seminar. She sat in her usual corner, half hiding behind a datapad, when Dr. Mills started the presentation on understanding human social bonds. "Humans are naturally protective of those they consider friends," Dr. Mills explained, displaying various images on the main screen. "Particularly when there's a significant size difference, humans often display what we call protective instincts, similar to how we treat small animals or children. Leanie's antenna drooped. So that's why Tom always checked on her. She was basically a space puppy to him. The thought made her feel strangely hollow inside. However, Dr. Mills continued, this protective behavior doesn't diminish our respect for other species. It's simply part of human nature to want to ensure the comfort and safety of our friends. As the presentation continued, Lenny found herself taking actual notes instead of just pretending to. Everything started making sense. The shared meals, the friendly conversations, the constant checking up on her well-being. She'd been reading romance into simple friendship. After the seminar, Lieutenant Baker approached her with a cup of hot chocolate sized perfectly for her hands. "Thought you might like this," she said, kneeling down to Leanie's level. "You seemed pretty focused during the presentation." "Thank you," Lenny replied, accepting the drink. I think I've been misunderstanding a lot of things about humans." "Oh." Baker sat down on the floor, making herself less towering. "Want to talk about it?" For the first time since arriving on the station, Lenny felt comfortable enough to be honest. "In my culture, sharing food and asking personal questions are, well, they're courtship behaviors. I thought everyone was trying to. You know." Baker's eyes widened before she burst into gentle laughter. "Oh my goodness, no wonder you've been so nervous. You thought we were all trying to court you." Leanie's face darkened with embarrassment. "I sent so many panic messages home about it." "That's actually really cute," Baker said, still chuckling. "But hey, at least now you know we just wanted to be friends." "Friends," Leanie repeated, testing the word. "It's different in my culture. We don't really have casual friendships like humans do. Everything is more formal." "That sounds lonely," Baker commented. "It is," Lenny admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. "I think that's why I got so confused. Nobody's ever just been nice to me without wanting something in return." Just then, Tom walked past, spotted them, and waved. Lenny found herself waving back automatically, her antenna perking up. Baker noticed the reaction and smiled knowingly. "Although," she said carefully, "sometimes friendship can develop into something else. If both parties are interested, of course." Lenny nearly dropped her hot chocolate. "What? No. I mean, he's human. And I'm, well, look at me." "Size differences haven't stopped interspecies relationships before," Baker shrugged. "Just last year, we had a marriage between a human and a gargantuan. Now that was a size difference." Leanie's mind reeled with this new information. "But I thought humans just saw me as something small to protect." "We protect our friends because we care," Baker explained. "But caring can take many forms. The question is, how do you feel about certain humans?" Before Lenny could respond, her communicator chimed. It was another message from her supervisor. "Cultural recalibration successful. Please confirm understanding of human social behaviors." Looking at the message, then at Baker's kind face, and finally at Tom's retreating form, Lenny felt something shift in her understanding. She'd been so wrong about human intentions, but maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Maybe understanding humans better would help her understand her own feelings too. "I think," she said slowly, both to Baker and in her reply message, "I'm finally starting to figure things out." Her antenna twitched happily as she took another sip of her hot chocolate. For the first time since arriving on the station, she felt like she might actually belong here. Not as a terrified diplomat, not as a small creature to be protected, but as herself. Now she just had to figure out what to do about these new, very confusing feelings she was developing for a certain human security officer. Understanding human friendship was one thing. Dealing with an actual crush on a human was entirely different, as Lenny discovered during her 5th week on Earth Station 1. She found herself doing ridiculous things, like taking the long route to her quarters just to pass by security station where Tom worked. One particular morning, she was pretending to study a completely uninteresting wall panel near the security office when Commander Reed's voice made her jump. "Ambassador Lenny, is there something wrong with that panel?" "No. I mean, yes. Her antenna twisted in embarrassment. I was just inspecting the station's infrastructure. For diplomatic purposes. Reed raised an eyebrow. The panel that controls the coffee machine. Linny wanted to disappear into the station's recycling system. I find human beverages fascinating, she mumbled. Just then, Tom emerged from the security office. Commander, Ambassador. He greeted them both with a smile that made Linny's knees wobble. Everything okay out here? Our ambassador seems very interested in coffee machines, Reed said, amusement clear in his voice. Oh, would you like to try some coffee? Tom offered. I was just about to take my break. No. Linny squeaked, backing away. I mean, coffee makes my antenna vibrate. Very dangerous. Could cause a diplomatic incident. Must go now. She scurried away, leaving both humans staring after her in confusion. Back in her quarters, Linny paced in circles. This is ridiculous, she muttered to herself. I'm a trained diplomat. I should be able to handle a simple conversation without panicking. Her communicator chimed with a message from Lieutenant Baker. Saw you running away from the coffee incident. Want to talk about it? Linny groaned but agreed to meet Baker in the hydroponics bay, where the plants made her feel more at ease. I'm making a fool of myself, Linny confessed, sitting among the earth flowers. I can't even look at him without my translator glitching. Baker sat cross-legged on the floor beside her. You know, humans get crushes too. We act just as silly when we like someone. But it's different. He's so tall and well, look at me. I barely reach his waist. Love doesn't care about height, Baker said gently. Love. Linny nearly fell over. Who said anything about love? This is just a temporary malfunction of my logical processes. Aha, Baker smiled knowingly. Is that why you've been studying human relationships in the database? The computer logged 57 searches for human dating customs from your terminal. Linny's face turned a deep purple. I was just conducting research for diplomatic purposes. Their conversation was interrupted by Tom's voice over the station's comm system. Security notification. All personnel please be advised of scheduled gravity maintenance in Section C. Linny's antenna perked up just hearing his voice, then drooped when she realized how obvious her reaction was. You've got it bad, Baker observed. Is there a cure? Linny asked hopefully. Just one, Baker replied with a grin. You could try talking to him. Talking? To Tom. About feelings. Linny's antenna curled up tight. I'd rather face a black hole. Well, you can't avoid him forever. This station isn't that big. As if to prove Baker's point, Tom himself walked into the hydroponics bay, carrying some security equipment. Linny dove behind a large plant, forgetting that her glowing antennae were still visible above the leaves. Hi, Baker, Tom called out. And, is that Ambassador Linny behind the ficus? Just examining Earth flora. Linny's muffled voice came from behind the plant. Very important diplomatic research. Baker stood up, shaking her head fondly. I'll leave you two to discuss. Botany. She walked out, giving Linny an encouraging thumbs up on her way. Left alone with Tom, Linny slowly emerged from behind the plant, her antenna twitching nervously. She opened her mouth to say something diplomatic and professional, but what came out was, your gravity maintenance announcements are very well articulated. Tom blinked in surprise, then smiled that wonderful smile that made her feel like she was floating in zero gravity. Thank you, he replied, looking confused but pleased. I practiced them in the mirror. Linny wanted to crawl back behind the plant. She had definitely been spending too much time around humans. She was starting to act just as weird as they did. The turning point in Linny's stay on Earth Station, one came during an unexpected emergency. The station's artificial gravity system malfunctioned, causing sporadic gravity fluctuations throughout several sections. Linny was in the cafeteria when it happened. One moment she was carrying her lunch tray. The next she was floating toward the ceiling along with various pieces of food and utensils. Everyone stay calm. Tom's voice came over the comm system. Gravity will be restored shortly. Please grab onto something secure. Easier said than done for someone her size. Lenny flailed helplessly in the air, her small arms unable to reach any of the handholds designed for humans. She watched in horror as the ceiling got closer and closer. Suddenly, a strong hand gently caught her arm. It was Tom, who had used his magnetic boots to walk up the wall toward her. "I've got you," he said softly, pulling her close to secure her. "Just hold on to me until we get the gravity back." Leanie's antenna curled in embarrassment, but she couldn't deny feeling safe in his grip. For the first time, their size difference didn't terrify her. It made her feel protected. "Thank you," she managed to say, her face pressed against his uniform. "This is not very dignified for a diplomat." Tom chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Even diplomats need help sometimes. Besides, you're handling this better than the Centaurian ambassador. He's hiding in a storage locker." The gravity restored itself with a gentle hum, and Tom carefully set her back on her feet. But something had changed. Lenny didn't immediately run away or make up an excuse about diplomatic duties. Instead, she found herself saying, "Would you like to have coffee sometime? I mean, I can't drink coffee because of the antenna thing, but I could have tea while you have coffee." Tom's face lit up with a smile. "I'd like that." Over the next few days, Lenny discovered something surprising. The more time she spent around humans, especially Tom, the less intimidating they became. During their coffee/tea meeting, she learned that Tom had a pet hamster named Cosmic, a creature even smaller than her that he cared for deeply. "Size doesn't matter when it comes to friendship or caring about someone," he explained, watching her sip her tea. "What matters is who they are inside." Lenny found herself sharing stories about her home world, her fears about coming to the station, and even her initial misunderstandings about human behavior. To her surprise, Tom didn't laugh at her. "Cultural differences can be tricky," he said understandingly. "When I first met a Centaurian, I tried to shake hands. Didn't know that touching tentacles was considered very intimate in their culture." The poor guy turned completely blue. Her confidence grew steadily. During the station's weekly meetings, she started contributing ideas instead of hiding in the corner. She helped Dr. Mills organize a cultural exchange festival, teaching humans about Teneri customs while learning more about Earth traditions. Commander Reed noticed the change in her. "You've grown a lot since you arrived," he commented one day. "Not in size, obviously, but in spirit." "I've learned that being small doesn't mean I have to feel small," Lenny replied, her antenna held high with pride. During a quiet evening in the observation deck, watching Earth's moon rise over the planet below, Tom asked her something unexpected. "Do you still find humans scary?" Lenny thought about it carefully. "Not scary," she said finally. "Just big. But I'm learning that big can be nice. And I'm learning that small can be brave," Tom replied with a gentle smile. Looking up at him, Lenny realized she no longer felt the need to run away or make excuses. She was finally comfortable being herself, a tiny alien who had somehow found her place among the giants. Her communicator chimed with a message from her supervisor. Progress report on human integration. For once, Lenny knew exactly what to say. Integration successful. Humans are not as terrifying as previously reported. They're just big softies. Literally. Tom read the message over her shoulder and laughed. Lenny found she rather liked making him laugh, even if she had to float to reach his shoulder level to do it. On her final week at Earth Station 1, Lenny stood before the assembled crew and alien diplomats, her antenna held high with newfound confidence. The small podium specially crafted for her made her feel not diminished, but respected. "When I first arrived," she began, "I was terrified of humans. Everything about them seemed overwhelming. Their size, their loud voices, their constant smiling." She paused as scattered chuckles rippled through the audience. "But now, as I prepare to return home, I realize I was wrong about many things." Her eyes met Tom's in the crowd, and her antenna curled slightly in what humans now recognize as her version of a smile. I've prepared a guide for future Teneri visitors, she continued. I'm calling it Don't Panic, a small being's guide to befriending humans. First rule: if a human offers you food, they're probably not proposing marriage. The hall erupted in laughter, and even Commander Reed wiped tears from his eyes. Second rule: when a human kneels down to talk to you, they're not submitting to your authority, they're just being polite. And third, yes, they really are that friendly all the time. After the presentation, during her farewell party, Linny found herself surrounded by friends rather than intimidating giants. Dr. Mills presented her with a miniature potted rose. Just as a friend, she clarified with a wink. Lieutenant Baker gave her a custom-made coffee mug sized for her hands, despite knowing she couldn't drink coffee. But it was Tom who waited until the party was winding down to approach her. So, he said, kneeling down to her level like he always did now, I hear Teneri diplomatic rotations happen every 6 months. They do, Linny confirmed, her antenna twitching nervously. Why do you ask? Well, I was thinking of applying for the security liaison position on your home world, he said casually. They're looking for someone with experience in interspecies relations. Linny's antenna shot straight up in surprise. You'd come to my world, but everything there would be too small for you. They're building human-sized facilities, Tom replied. And besides, I've learned that size doesn't matter much when you care about someone. Linny's face turned a deep purple. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I'd like to keep getting to know you, Tom said softly. If you're interested, this time without any cultural misunderstandings. But what about all the complications? Linny asked, even as her hearts raced. The logistics alone. I've already researched it, Tom grinned. Did you know there are 17 successful human Teneri couples in the galaxy? They've even written guides about making it work. You researched that? Linny squeaked. I had to do something while you were pretending to study coffee machine panels. Linny buried her face in her hands. You knew about that? It was pretty obvious, Tom laughed. Especially since that panel actually controls the waste recycling system, not the coffee machine. Before Linny could die of embarrassment, Tom gently took her tiny hand in his. So, what do you say? Want to try writing our own guide to human Teneri relationships? Looking up at him, way up, Linny felt all her remaining fears melt away. I'd like that, she said. But first, I need to send one last message home. She pulled out her communicator and typed, Update on human interaction study. Previous reports of terrifying giants were greatly exaggerated. Requesting extended diplomatic assignment. P.S. Might have found a mate after all. Details to follow. The response came quickly. Assignment extension granted. Relationship details eagerly anticipated. Don't forget to breathe. As the farewell party continued around them, Linny and Tom sat together, planning their future across the stars. She realized that sometimes the scariest things in life, like falling for someone 3 times your size, could turn out to be the most wonderful. Her final entry in her guide read, Remember, fellow small beings, humans may be giant, loud, and occasionally overwhelming, but they have equally giant hearts. Just don't panic when they show you exactly how big those hearts can be. The end.